This video is sponsored by Curology.
We call it Pixel.
We're proud to introduce the Google Pixel 2,
Google Pixel 3,
Pixel 4.
Whenever a new phone comes out, and rightfully so, it gets all the attention. It's got a shiny new feature that's probably been rumored for 5 or 6 months, so we finally get a chance to see it. But usually it's at the expense of what came before it. And I think that's especially true with Google's Pixel line. Pixel 5 still relatively new. There's rumors of the Pixel 6, and we've kind of forgotten the Pixels that came before it. But Google's phone line, I think, is so unique in the entire space of smartphones, especially when it comes to Android. Like, they've always been held up by amazing camera, Google software, and Google's willingness to keep updating them regularly. That's what's made the Pixels great. So I get this question all the time from friends and family, and it's which phone should I buy? And I tend to just default to whatever the newest thing is. If you're an iPhone user, pick up an iPhone 12. If you're an Android user, pick up the latest Samsung or Pixel phone. But that mentality, I don't think is necessarily right. And I kind of wanted to revisit older gen phones, especially the Pixel, who continue to get software updates, sort of see how good they were. And the results were incredibly surprising. So, what are we working with? We have 5 generations of flagship Pixels. For this video, I'm not considering the A models. Maybe that'll be a totally separate video. But dating back to 2016. And with the exception of the current gen phone, the Pixel 5, there's always been a regular version and an XL version, and the biggest difference has generally been battery size and screen. But for the most part, they've been identical phones that have released pretty much on schedule for 5 years. So as sad as it might be, I am not going to count, though, the very first Pixel, the launch Pixel, because that one does not support Android 11. But from 2 to 5, which are really gonna be the ones you're gonna focus on, those all support the most current version, release version at least, of Android. And by focusing on what's similar, I don't wanna discount the differences between these phones, because a lot has changed from generations 2 to 5. We had bezels get slimmer, bezels get bigger, we had notches come and notches go, we had facial recognition come and go. Screens have obviously improved drastically over the years. So I'm not discounting those real world differences, and those are things that matter to a lot of people. But the similarities in all the phones are things that I wanted to focus on, at least for this video. All right, so I want to focus a lot on cameras. When the Pixel first came out, that was the flagship feature, and that's still true to this day. But the first time we've seen really phones take a huge leap forward in cameras. But since that first one really just knocked it out of the park, there's been small improvements from the first Pixel to the 5. Still 12 megapixel sensors on board, still night sight, still portrait, and of course they all still have Google's amazing processing, a lot of which is happening actually on device. So to prove my point, you know it's coming. It is blind test time with photos from the Pixel 2, Pixel 3, Pixel 4, and Pixel 5. So while we were thinking about the Pixel and its history and what the line has accomplished, it wasn't the only line of phones that we were discussing doing this type of video for. Actually, obviously, Apple was one of the ones we thought to do first. And if you want to know more about the Apple side, we have a whole separate channel actually called The Apple Circle, hosted by Robert Rosenfeld, where it goes into a lot of detail about what Apple's doing now, what they're doing next, and sort of builds up to what's coming from them. If you want to check them out, and I think you should, we'll put the links, where you expect them. So first, look at these shots. Can you tell any difference in the overall quality? Can you tell difference when it comes to how it's handling skies, how it's handling clouds, how it looks with plants, facial tones, whether or not it's doing smoothing? Look at the highlights, look at some of the lowlights. Do you see the difference? And maybe you see subtle differences, maybe you don't. But if you're looking at these photos and they all look similar to you, I think that's the main point of this video. From 2 to 5, all photos have looked absolutely amazing. So if you have guesses on which was which, put it in the comments, but here's the answer for which phone took which pictures. So to my eye, the Pixel 2 photos tend to look a little bit warmer, and I actually prefer that look to what we got with the Pixel 3, 4, and 5. And that makes sense. If you actually look at the hardware in those phones, it's the exact same sensor. It's a Sony IMX363 sensor that's in the Pixel 3, Pixel 4, and Pixel 5. So pair that with Google's processing, and of course it would make sense that these photos are going to look really similar for the past 3 years. Now, obviously hardware has changed. I don't want to discount that. Google added telephoto on the 4, added ultra wide angle on the 5, and those are differences that matter to a lot of people. But look at the actual quality of the pictures themselves, and you can see the differences aren't that big. And while the photos, I think, all look amazing and some version of really good, the video side is I guess the opposite side of the coin. They all shoot 4K, and to my eye, none of them really look that great. They tend to, at least to my eye, look really over compressed. But again, same sensor, similar results. If you take away anything from this, it just goes to show how far ahead Google was when that Pixel 2 came out, how advanced the sensor was. And other manufacturers had access to the same hardware, but Google's software, they've continued to update year over year, has made the photos from that widely available hardware always look amazing. And it is staggering to see a phone that came out now 3 years ago take photos that can rival flagship phones from right now, phones that cost $1,200, $1,300, $1,400. It's a testament to really how amazing and how far ahead Google's been on the photo side. So when it comes to like personal facial care, I've been spending most of my time grooming this sweet beard the better part of 2 years, not giving that much attention to like what's underneath it. I'm trying to give a bit more thought and care to like my skin. I'm not trying to rediscover a fountain of youth and look like I'm 20 again, but at least make myself as healthy as I can be. And that's where Curology has come in. So they do a lot of things really interesting and especially very different when it comes to skincare. So first, you are getting a custom mixture of products that are tailored just for you from like a dermatology professional. So you have to send in pictures of your face from different angles. They ask you a couple other questions, asking you things about allergies and what your goals are. And you get a custom kit of skincare products that are tailored just for you. So you have lots of different products, whatever you decide is best for you, you can get. For me, it was a cleanser and some lotions to better take care of my face. It's a subscription service, and you can sort of tailor how often you get their products. But for somebody whose life is on camera, I need to start taking better care of this area of my body, and something like Curology is a really good way to start that. If you want to give it a shot, the first month is free. You just pay $5 for shipping. It's a subscription service. You can tailor how often things are going to come to you. And if you want to check out Curology for yourself, link to them down below. So aside from camera, like software and performance are things that obviously really matter with a phone, especially if you're talking about using a phone that came out a few years ago. So the range of processors, just to remind you, from the Pixel 2 was the 835, the 3 has the 845, the 4 has the 855, then for the Pixel 5, they went a bit downstream, at least they went away from the flagship processors, and it's got the Snapdragon 765G. The spec side out of the way, I think, again, like cameras, what matters is how it performs. How is it performing with opening apps? In even more extreme cases, how does it perform with some of the current flagship mobile games on Android? So I went with PUBG and Asphalt 9, the two most like intensive games currently available for Android. But also I wanted to kind of do an old school test, like what opened faster, what gave me the best graphics, those sort of objective things that you can quantify. And the results were actually very surprising. So as you'd expect, the Pixel 2 was the slowest, and then the Pixel 3. But where things got interesting, the Pixel 4 actually beat out the Pixel 5, and maybe it's because of the flagship processor, but it was interesting to see the phone that came out now over a year ago beat the one that's just a few months old. Also interesting, at least for PUBG, Pixel 5 didn't even have the option for max settings. It wasn't even like it was grayed out, it just wasn't there at all. Just goes to show the difference, at least in the headroom, with the 765G versus sort of the flagship Qualcomm processors of the past few years. So what I found surprisingly interesting, with all that stuff out of the way, was actually using the Pixel 2 again, and in all fairness, I hadn't picked this phone up in years. It still felt plenty fast. I mean, opening apps were pretty quick. I didn't notice any sort of lag. There was no sort of scrolling stutter. There was no sort of slowness in multitasking. It was still a very fast phone. If I sort of had blinders on and I just saw a screen, I would think this was a modern phone that just didn't have a higher refresh rate screen. I think that's actually a big point to make as well, is that our perception, and mine too, was sort of the shattered this, the perception of what an older phone is in your head versus what it actually is in reality are sometimes very different. I think I've been conditioned especially to think like newer, better, newer, faster, but that's not always the case. I think that's a big reason why a lot of people tend to gravitate towards the last gen flagship phones, because they're still amazingly capable, but they're also usually discounted. So looking back at the Pixel 2, it kind of reset, I guess, my expectations a little bit for phones. And I think this is a big reason why maybe we should start caring more about software updates than we should hardware updates. Now, hardware obviously matters. You have different sensors on cameras that can give you wide angle or telephoto. Those things do matter. But the software updates, the things that the phone is more capable of month over month and year over year, make a giant difference. And you don't always see it if you look at from one update to the next. But if you look at what a phone could do from launch to 3 years later, differences are absolutely staggering. And I think Google doesn't get enough credit for continuing to support their older devices and also not like neutering them, not sort of limiting features that they get you to buy their new phone, but still making their older hardware as capable as it possibly can. So I think if you're looking for a phone that has a really good camera, can have decent-ish battery life, and also can run the most recent software, you can go as far back as the Pixel 2 and still get an amazing phone with incredible cameras that can compete with $1,300, $1,400 flagships nowadays. But if you want to go a generation newer, you get software updates for what I assume is going to be at least another year. And the Pixel 3 looks to be an amazing sweet spot, sort of the whole line of phones. At least for me, this kind of reset expectations when it comes to phone recommendations for myself and friends and family. And for you, if you're like the go-to tech expert in your house, maybe you don't have to recommend phones that cost 3, 4, 5, in some cases 6 times as much as these phones go for nowadays. It was really surprising to see what Google's done over the years. I think is a big testament to how they've continued to support their older devices.